Welcome to our first episode of the Artsakh Podcast featuring Gev and Hagop, Executive Director of ANC Artsakh, and myself, Hagop, Advisor to the President of the Republic of Artsakh. We will be your hosts. The aim of the podcast is shedding light on the ground realities and ongoing developments, and most importantly, continuing to share the stories of the resilient people of Artsakh. We are currently on day 251 of the blockade.
So for our podcast, we're going to focus it in several different segments. The first 5-10 minutes of each podcast will be doing a rundown and an update of what's going on the ground here in Artsakh. Following that rundown, following the update, we'll be bringing on various guests that can shed light on many layers of society and some of the things that are happening here in Artsakh. To start with a brief rundown, I think it's important to start post-2020. After the war in Artsakh, we saw the development of various pressure points upon the populace of Artsakh by the Azerbaijani regime. Significantly with the imposition of the blockade about 8 months ago. During this blockade, Azerbaijan has cut off the gas, the electricity supply line, and our only route connecting us to Armenia and essentially the rest of the world. What does that mean? That means that food, medicine, and all the other supplies that any population needs to survive has been deprived for us from Artsakh. These past few months have been incredibly difficult for the people of Artsakh, as many of you guys have been paying attention. We've seen recent deaths. We've seen pressure points on various segments of society, and we've seen the people of Artsakh go through much. The people of Artsakh are incredibly resilient, we know this, but no population should have to go through this. And during the direction of this podcast and the coming podcast, we're going to be shedding light on this situation.
Over 1,800 citizens in Artsakh could not get necessary medical treatment due to suspended surgeries, and around 3,900 people, including 550 children, have been separated from their homes and families as a result of this blockade, some of which have been able to return with the help of the ICRC and the Russian peacekeepers. About 17 times fewer vital goods have been imported. Just to give you a perspective, 5,715 tons have been imported instead of the 100,400 tons just in the 251 days. More than a third of businesses have stopped operation, and about 17,000 people have lost their jobs and income. Unemployment rate has significantly increased. Multiple construction projects have been halted, including roads, water lines, apartments, and infrastructure. Artsakh's economy has lost around $475 million due to the blockade, leading to more than a 53% decline in the predicted GDP.
And if I can, add, I think it's important to note that we don't get just lost in all these numbers and facts and figures, and that's partly why we want to do this podcast in sharing the personal stories, sharing the story of Artsakh, and when Hagop is talking about the number of people that are unemployed, the number of people that are facing health difficulties, the number of people that are facing malnutrition, we have to look at this all from the context of attempted ethnic cleansing, which is what Artsakh is fighting against today on behalf of the Azerbaijani regime.
That's why today we thought that Gegham Stepanyan can join us. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, Gegham Stepanyan, who brings a wealth of experience to our conversation. Formerly a lecturer at the Department of History and Political Science of Artsakh State University, Gegham has taken on a significant role as the Human Rights Ombudsman of the Artsakh Republic since March 25, 2021, following his election by the National Assembly of Artsakh. Join us as we delve into his insights on history, political science, and his important work in advocating for human rights in the region. Gegham, thank you for accepting our invitation. I would like to start by asking, how would you categorize what's going on in Artsakh right now? People use terms like ethnic cleansing and genocide. How is it applicable to what we see today?
First of all, thank you very much for this initiative, and I think that it will be very important for bringing the voices of Artsakh and speaking about the existing realities from the human perspectives and to societies of different countries as much as possible. As we are mainly using two terms for describing the situation in Artsakh, ethnic cleansing and genocide, I think that we should look closely what are the meanings of those terms. And first of all, we should speak about the ethnic cleansing, which is not a specified term under international law, and there is no precise definition to this a concept or acts that can be qualified as ethnic cleansing. But the UN Commission of Experts mandated to look into the violations of international humanitarian law in the context of former Yugoslavia described this term as purposeful policy of one ethnic or religious group designed to remove by violent means the civilian population of another ethnic or religious group. And what we witnessed since the November 22 ceasefire, the deliberate shootings towards our civilian communities, the killings of our civilians in their agricultural fields, the disruption of critical infrastructure, the usage of loudspeakers for intimidation of our population, and many other steps are speaking about the continuous, systematic, and purposeful policy of Azerbaijan for the reason of removal of Armenian population from Artsakh. Adding to this, the statements coming from the authorities of Azerbaijan and especially from the president of this country calling on the people of Artsakh either submit or to leave Artsakh, we can conclude that, of course, the tools that were being used by Azerbaijan since the establishment of ceasefire are speaking about the policy of ethnic cleansing. The term genocide is a purely legal word. It has its definition under international law, and it is defined by the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of a Crime of Genocide. And it is a composition, or it comprises 5 acts of a crime, killing the members of the specific group, racial, national, ethnic, religious group, the causing mental or physical harm, imposing living conditions for the destruction of the group, preventing birth, and forcibly transferring the children out of the group. So we see that with the blockade, which has been going for 8 months, we should speak more about genocide rather than ethnic cleansing, because the starvation, malnutrition, and all the deprivation that our people are going through are speaking about genocide.
And we're seeing all this now, as you know, now moving to day 251. Every day that passes in Artsakh, we're seeing evidence of all that.
Yeah. We are dealing with not with the genocidal intention of a certain country of Azerbaijan, but we are dealing with ongoing blockade, and this is in fact the conclusion that was made also by one of the reputable specialists in the international criminal law, the founding prosecutor of
for the ICC,
for the ICC, and I completely agree with him. And I think that this blockade should be qualified as a genocide and should be punished by the international community with the usage of all the mechanisms defined by the convention.
And I think, Gegham mentioned something important here, and it's something that we don't necessarily often see in the visual imagery that comes out of Artsakh. But when people define genocide or ethnic cleansing through the lens of violence, we have to keep in mind that forced starvation is violence. Keeping people from having a land route, from the freedom of movement, that's violence. Keeping people from medical care, that's violence. That the violence that we're talking about that is being enacted today is not necessarily seen through the prism of guns and tanks all the time, though they do shoot into Artsakh very regularly. They're doing it through a silent means, and correct me if I'm mistaken, this is also part of their plan. to try to do this through a means where systematically, but in a silent capacity.
Of course, and this is why Ocampo mentioned that they are weaponizing starvation, and they are using starvation as a weapon for committing genocide, and it is not. It is defined by international many documents saying that these kind of actions are also crimes and they also should be punished.
I think he did the opening on the second directive, if I'm not mistaken, and he tried to explain that that constitutes genocide. What's happening now in Artsakh, if we give the simple interpretation of the second directive, that's genocide.
Not only Ocampo is speaking about this, but many other, especially specialists in this field. Lemkin Institute just yesterday made a statement saying that we were speaking about genocide 2 years ago, alarming the international community that Azerbaijan is planning genocide in Nagorno-Karabakh, and other scholars in genocidal studies also are insisting on this.
Gegham, I wanted to ask it, taking it a little bit differently. How has the international community responded to the situation in Artsakh in terms of addressing concerns about the ethnic cleansing and genocide allegations that we're putting forward? Because at the end of the day, yes, it is evident, but how is the international community responding to all this?
At this point, we can say that we have only statements and expressed positions by human rights organizations, but by different individuals, reputable individuals on international level. But we have no real actions taken by decision makers of different countries in different international organizations with actions that should and must be taken in order to prevent or in order to stop the ongoing genocide in Artsakh. You know that the UN Security Council meeting was held and we witnessed the positions taken by different countries. There we had expectations of having more solid and more exact naming of the situation, but unfortunately this didn't happen.
And I think that this speaks to the core of the bulk of the work that the Human Rights Ombudsman's office is doing, the government of Artsakh is working on, and our ANC offices around the world. It's how do we go from a place where we see statements and condemnation, which, look, it's a good start. Oftentimes when there was days that we didn't have that either. Yeah. So for them to outright say that Azerbaijan is committing a campaign of ethnic cleansing or they're purposely blockading and starving people, that's a good start. But how do we go from statements to tangible action? And by tangible action, we mean punitive measures. When is Azerbaijan going to lose something? When is Azerbaijan going to face a repercussion for trying to starve off and cleanse 120,000 people? And, I want to hear some of your thoughts. I know we mentioned the UN Security Council meeting, but did it meet expectations? Did it fall short of expectations? Or can you only grade that through the prism of what each country said rather than the whole of the UN Security Council?
I think that in general we can say that it was important to bring this issue to the attention of UN Security Council, and in some ways I think that it was overdue. The Security Council that is responsible for the maintenance of peace and security worldwide should have paid more attention to the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh and to the situation with the blockage of Lachin corridor earlier. But however, I think that we had three main records made during the meeting of the Security Council. Firstly, I think that it was important to mention that Nagorno-Karabakh conflict exists. It is discussed once again internationally, and it is not an internal matter of Azerbaijan. You know that Azerbaijan has been trying to present that there is no Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, that the issue is closed with, they resolve the conflict with military means, and today we should only speak about post-conflict realities. But the speeches that we heard during the meeting argued otherwise, saying that there is still conflict and sides should resolve the conflict by peaceful means, by negotiations.
Yes, I think what you mentioned, it's important to create all that evidence, all that paper, those transcripts, all that, because later on, we can use that. Even the reports that you prepare, via the Ombudsman every, couple of months and etc. At least now, we've got something we can use in the future, more tangible, something that...
Of course, every document, every such kind of discussions are very important, which we include in our reports, in our daily work to build up our next steps.
Especially in lieu of the fact that, one difficulty that I've noticed being here in Artsakh is that the blockade isn't just keeping out, food, medicine, and supplies, but it's keeping out observers, it's keeping out
information
journalists.
In general. Yeah.
So the information that's come out of Artsakh, I've noticed, has been from Artsakh, by Artsakh. And to present that on an international stage, as you said, and to have that documented as a transcript of time and history is going to be very important, because we have nobody else doing it for us, right? And that's a big bulk of the work that you guys carry out in your office as well.
Yeah, you are completely right. And even during the Security Council meeting, we saw that the representative of OCHA said that they have no any kind of sources for validating the information, and the only source is the ICRC. And I think that it is also a failure of the UN that during these 8 months has no any representation in Artsakh, has no any independent source of information from Artsakh. And I hope that this after the UN Security Council meeting, they will think about that, having their independent source, having their representation.
I think even the reports from the ICRC are sometimes incomplete, or it feels sometimes that they're even biased. Biased not to our favor though. They're not trying even to be neutral in any way. We've seen it through my work, and through your work as well. You've seen it, I'm sure, that I believe that the ICRC needs to do a lot more than what they're doing.
I think so, even especially taking into account that they are the only international organization that are functioning in Artsakh, and they also bear responsibility to report about the situation on the ground. If they do not want to do so, then they should ask other international organizations, UN, saying that people are asking me, demanding from me to report about what is going on, but it is not under my mandate. So I request your assistance for having such kind of representation here, for reporting about the situation. Their statements are always very, very much neutral, very unfazed.
Watered down.
Yeah. So, and they say that this is the way that they are working, and this is the way of working that ensured 160 years of their existence.
As someone who's been born and bred in Artsakh, you've seen the war, you've lived through the blockade. What can you say about the whole Artsakh society today, and what is the state of the people?
Especially after the 2020 war, we found ourselves in a very difficult situation, and especially the generation that was born after the 1991, after the establishment of the independence of Artsakh. It is really very difficult for us, because we received the independent statehood as granted, if you can say, because our childhood, our life, during our life, we always know that this is the Republic of Artsakh, and This is our free and independent homeland, and there could not be any other reality. But since after the war, especially during this blockade, we are going through a very difficult psychological challenges.
Do you think that shattered? Sometimes I think like when you live, as you said, in a republic that you call home, that you think is free and independent, and one that you might think is free and independent forever, right? Just by its given nature. Do you think that shattered some people's expectation or that reality that they were living in, that, you know what, there's a chance that someone might take this away from us? Yeah. Like when you were growing up, did you ever think that would be a possibility?
No, we didn't think about that. We caught that with paid. I mean, our victims,
the lives, generations,
ensured for us independence and free homeland for centuries. Mm-hmm. But today I always repeat that there is a huge gap between our identity and the reality that we live. Our identity always strives to the values that we were brought up: victory, homeland, and many other important values. But the reality dictates us to feel and experience something very different. This is why we are psychologically very in a very vulnerable situation. And adding to this the deprivations and sufferings of this blockade and uncertainties with the future of our homeland. So this is the reality that today Artsakh people live. Of course, with the hope that with the help of all Armenians and with the help of the Republic of Armenia and our friends in different countries, we will be able to overcome and to ensure our existence, our Armenian, to ensure the existence of Armenian Artsakh.
Okay, I agree. I agree that I can see it in the everyday lives of people. That it's very difficult. Because let's not forget the pressure that's on the people of Artsakh. Because let's face it, the only victory that the Armenian people have had, it's Artsakh. So the whole pressure lies on the people here to maintain that. So
I think that pressure gets tougher too. You know what I noticed yesterday? I was walking down the street and there's a few high-rise buildings, right, that we were building for displaced people from the war, from Shushi and Hadrut. And that was the first things that I saw when I first came to Artsakh about 1.5 years ago, that like there's so many people in need of housing that we are in this resurgence, rebuilding phase of Artsakh post-war. And then that was paused by the blockade. And I think that does something psychologically to say that, okay, look, we know the next few years are going to be tough because we have to rebuild. And then the Azerbaijani regime comes and says, no, we're not even going to let you rebuild. The unhoused stay unhoused. That process of healing, that process of regaining strength, we're going to cut them off. And I think that's something that the Azerbaijani regime noticed. I don't think they expected, and this goes to the resilience and the strength of the people of Artsakh, that you face a war, you're completely besieged, you lose 70% of your territory, and the vast majority of your population comes back to live in Artsakh. Yep. I think that took them by surprise, and I think that's part of the reason that they're inflicting this blockade, because they thought, the war is happening, the Armenian people on their own will leave Artsakh, and they didn't. And then they didn't during the blockade. So if you notice, every month they make the blockade a little tougher. Yeah. 1 month they cut off the gas, another month the electricity, another month complete access.
Just a few days ago, the internet. Just to add up on what you just said, Gev, just figures-wise, over 30% of the people after the war were IDPs. So suddenly, the cities and everything, they've had to cope with that over 30% that had to move into the cities. And I think the reconstruction could have been faster, better, and everything, or everything could have been better, but in hindsight it's easy to say. But I think the government has done quite a good job, trying to find the housing, build the housing, and etc. to be able to accommodate all those people.
It's not necessarily a knock on the government. I'm speaking to what does that do psychologically to a people that are reeling and waiting to get back? And I believe you guys might know the statistics better. Some of the psychological implications of how many kids need to see psychologists, how many people are going through that is jarring today.
Yeah, MSF has released a report which, it's quite troubling. The numbers are quite troubling now. But I think, with the help of, different actors and etc., we'll be able to kind of, deal with that as well. But, it's going to leave its mark. This blockade will leave its mark. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question on what you were talking about, Gegham. How have the people of Artsakh been coping with the challenges posed by the prolonged blockade and the impact it's had on their daily lives and, overall well-being? We kind of mentioned that, but, if you can just delve in it a little bit, people come to your office, you talk with a lot of people and etc., so you'll have a better insight.
The situation is really very, very hard for ordinary people in Artsakh, people who, especially for the vulnerable groups of our society, people with disabilities, people with chronic diseases, children, elderly people. There are many, many social problems connected with this, with the blockade. They are approaching us, they are asking for help, they are bringing different complaints, and we are trying to support them as much as possible. But we also should understand that having no imports from outside and being deprived from any kind of humanitarian access for more than 2 months, also it is really very difficult to find some food or to find necessary medication and to provide this to our people. I can say that this situation cannot last. Especially we are reaching to autumn and winter, and we will not even have the product that we are producing locally. I mean, the fruits, vegetables that we produce now locally, we will not have that. Yeah. And adding to this, the problems with heating, problem with not having gas supply, and having only very limited electricity supply will really make a humanitarian catastrophe.
And I think, what gets lost in, especially the last few weeks, we've seen an uptick in media attention, which is good, but that coincides or runs parallel to the fact that things get worse.
Yeah.
And that's why people, but one thing, like every time I speak to a journalist or a media outlet from the outside world, the one thing I try to put at the forefront of their minds is, look, you think this is tough. It's going to get worse.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and fast. And I think that's what needs to be at the forefront of every discussion, every conversation that we have with the outside world. In that, yes, there's starvation, malnutrition, all of those things. These are the good months, right?
Yeah.
There's going to come a month where we can't harvest anything, where the gas supply due to like the lack of heating is going to lead to hypothermia. It's going to lead to people dying, and we're going to see it exponentially increase. And I think this is something we have to prepare Armenians around the world for, that it gets tougher. We have to, in a sense, prepare our own populace here for. And we have to make sure that the international community isn't desensitized, right? The media outlets and stuff. Like, you guys think 1 or 2 cases of malnutrition is bad. It is going to get heartbreaking in the winter.
I think we were talking about it yesterday, when you've got such a big, the groups of population that belong in the vulnerable group, being the 30,000 children, the 28,000, elderly, the 8,000 to 9,000, people with disabilities. You've got already about 50% of your population, and maybe more, that, they're in that vulnerable group. And with winter coming, the situation will deteriorate really fast. That's what the international community needs to understand, and that's what the messaging from us, from the diaspora and everyone needs to be, that this is the good months. The bad months are coming, and we're already in mid-August.
Yeah, and the intervention by the international community is needed day before. I mean, of course, we were speaking about the humanitarian consequences of the blockade during these 8 months, but I think that particularly, especially during these 2 months, they started to understand that we are approaching to the critical point, and it is, and we also see this by the reaction of international media. They are now speaking more about the situation. They are paying more attention, and I think that it will help us to finally to have to ensure any kind of international intervention and assistance from international community.
Gegham, look, I think that, and I'm very happy about this, that so many people in the diaspora are now familiar with you and your work. Though I'm not happy for the reasoning behind that, because it's been, partly due to this blockade that you've served in a capacity, in essence, as a spokesperson for the voice of the people of Artsakh, naturally, because you speak English, you're a young man that's come up, educated in the diaspora, you have the capacity to do these things. But I want you to kind of shed some light on what, in light, or let's say in the absence of a blockade and the campaign of ethnic cleansing, what would a human rights ombudsman do anywhere else in the world? That, your job has gone from, preventing this mass catastrophe and spreading this word across the globe. But what is the Human Rights Ombudsman's office? What were you guys doing before, this calamity?
In general, the main mission of Human Rights Ombudsman in different countries, in peaceful countries, not in conflict zones, the main mission is the protection of human rights from the violations that come from state and local self-government bodies. I mean, to protect human rights internally. And that's why many ombudsmen even do not understand why we are so engaged in these kind of activities, because they have only experience of working with internal issues, with issues that
against the government.
Against the government and against.
But would you say our standing is like, if we don't have a state, a government, and a people, we wouldn't even be able to carry out the work of the Ombudsman's office, right?
Of course, the Ombudsman's mission is also to speak about mass violations of human rights, and this is what we are doing. What we have been doing is especially starting from 2016 after the
4-day war.
4-day war, with the appointment of Ruben Melikian, who was also very active in preparing reports speaking about the crimes that are being committed by Azerbaijan against Artsakh people. During the 44-day war, we published more than 25 reports covering the war crimes committed by Azerbaijan, bringing facts about the violations of international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and speaking about also about the Armenophobic policy of Armenophobia that is state sponsored policy in Azerbaijan. This is actually what we are doing, preparing reports, messages, letters, presenting to the international organizations.
Can you tell, I think it's an important interjection here for those listening at home or for journalists tuning into the podcast, where can folks find that information? If I want to pull reports from the Human Rights Ombudsman's office, if I want to get day-to-day updates on what's going on, where can I find that?
On our official website, artsakhombuds.am.
Awesome.
Yeah. And also we are very active on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We are putting everything about our activity, and also these reports are the links to these reports are available on our social media accounts. But yes, I always mention that I dream to be an ombudsman in a situation where the only thing is to protect the rights of people from state and local self-government bodies. And I hope that one day it will happen, and one day we will have our main mission will be just to monitor the situation.
It won't be an existential
Yeah.
issue, right? And
To educate human rights. It is also one of the priorities of Ombudsman's office worldwide. But unfortunately, we have completely different priorities, and we are fighting for ensuring the right to life of our people.
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into our next and our final question, and I think this is something that's near and dear to all of our hearts, Hagop and I, as diasporans that have moved here, you who have dedicated your entire life to the service of Artsakh. What does the future hold for Artsakh? Where are we going, and who do you think is going to take us there?
Oh, very, very difficult question. I can say that unfortunately now the future of Artsakh is not only is a matter also of the clash of geopolitical interest of different superpowers or different regional powers. We see that the engagement of Turkey is a factor of instability in the South Caucasus, and many things are changing. And to say how we know what we want, but we can't say what future holds for us. We will resist. We will continue our struggle for ensuring our Armenian Artsakh, for ensuring independent and free homeland for us and for our children. We will go through the deprivation and sufferings to keep the dignity of Armenian people high. But we know that with this very difficult situation, no one can say what will happen. Yeah. Of course, I want to be as sincere as possible. We should do everything that depends on us. We should put every effort to ensure the well-being of our country for overcoming this blockade and so on. But at the same time, we should understand that we should take into consideration the geopolitical realities and try to adapt our policies to these realities.
It's naive to think that we exist in a vacuum, obviously, that there are geopolitical and world powers at play here. There are things beyond our comprehension, beyond our grasp of control. But one thing I would say, and Hagop, I'd like you to add on to this too, is that the things that we do control.
Yeah.
How long can we survive here? How long can we resist? How long can we last? I think that is going to speak to the core of what happens. I don't know what tomorrow brings or the day after, and things change every single day. But in 100 days, one of those days might be beneficial for us. And the only way that we see that beneficial day is that we last. Is that we survive, is that we endure.
Yeah, I think it's, on the resilience part, it's everything to do on that. And we need to be resilient. We need to keep going. We can't stop. We can't give up. And, something that the diaspora needs to continue doing. And, some do it better than others. It's continue putting pressure. We need every single Armenian continuously putting pressure on their governments, on different officials, on different locals, that being, even the simplest thing, talking or sharing on social media, that's every little helps. First thing that we need to do, something that I heard, on a 7-point thing, if you like, map that was written down one day, was do not damage. The first thing that we need to do is do not damage Artsakh, we need to continue working, we need to continue putting pressure, and I believe that's what the diaspora needs to do. We need the assistance, we need the help. This blockade needs to be lifted one way or the other.
And, when we're talking about facing massive world powers, we're talking about facing a genocidal enemy at the door with a populace of 10 million people, oil resources, wealth, and a military that's uncomparable to ours. That's the basic state. Our only source of survival is found, one, within us, and through the collective strength and synergy of the global Armenian population. If we can say is, like, if we ask ourselves, what is one resource we have that many in the world don't have, that Azerbaijan might not have, that Turkey might not, is our global power. And our salvation lies in activating, using, and utilizing that global power and those resources. And again, you guys have resources at the door. Connect with the Human Rights Ombudsman's office for reports. Hagop's office is working directly with the government. ANCAs around the world are working on these issues day and night. There are avenues, depending on where you are, which point of attack that you want to help from. There are places that you can get involved. There was a famous French quote that said, "If I have not fought for my country, at least I will paint for it." So if you're a painter, paint for it. If you're a writer, write for it. If you're an engineer, come help us design things. There's a way for every single Armenian, every single diaspora, and everyone around the world to contribute to the long-term success of Artsakh.
And to our non-Armenian friends, of course, we need your help. Without you, we won't be able to do this.
Of course,
absolutely.
We are always speaking about Armenians, but we have many non-Armenian friends, non-Armenian, and allies, and we also should always appreciate their efforts and always continue to ask for their help.
I want to extend heartfelt gratitude for sharing your valuable insights and your personal experiences today and being with us on our first episode. Special thank you goes to Artsakh TV, Artsakh Public Radio for providing us with a platform to have this important conversation. To all our listeners, we sincerely appreciate your time and attention. We want to let you know that this is just the beginning. We're committed to this podcast journey, shedding light on the ground realities and ongoing developments.
And look, Hagop and I moved to Artsakh to bring Artsakh closer to us. But we started this podcast to bring Artsakh closer to you guys. And that's what we're going to work on doing diligently in the coming weeks and months. And we want to do everything that we can, above all, to tell the story of the people of Artsakh. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.